I've been working in the field of disability and with autism spectrum disorder since I first graduated in 2002. I work with people with and without a diagnosis or in the disability sector. But if you're working with a person with autism, to me it's just magic. Like, you get to see an absolute honesty from people. Sometimes that honesty leaves people feeling a little bit uncomfortable because it's often the blunt honesty that you received. But there's a quirkiness in terms of a sense of humour that is beyond what a lot of people actually have. Some of what is shared and what is expressed from my clients is just gold. It's absolute, adorable, it's funny, it's honest, and that's what I love, is the absolute honesty, that there's no filter, and the no filter just allows you to know exactly where you're standing and you're not left questioning in any way, shape or form. Look, the way in which I work with a person with any diagnosis, whether that be an autism spectrum disorder or intellectual impairment or mental illness or a person without a disability or a diagnosis, is first and foremost coming from the approach is that we are all exactly the same. Every single person with or without a diagnosis. And how we're all the same, well, there's two parts that I set a foundation with. So to me it's always about setting a foundation first and foremost. But the first foundation is that I come from the approach that at the core everybody is the same. At the core we all have a beautiful essence. We all have what I call an awesome, amazing, lovable being. And that being is in all of us. And so when you hold a person for the being, then you can't judge their behaviour based on bringing the behaviour and the being together, because to me they're two separate things. So you first and foremost lay the foundation to go, I know who you are, I know how exquisite you are, I know what an awesome, amazing, lovable being you are, and now let's address some of the behaviours that may not match that awesomeness. So we come from that approach. But the second approach is coming from the fact that we're all equal. Yeah, so whether a person has a label or not, to me we're all exactly the same. And so if I make it specific to autism right now, a lot of people will come to me and say, I can't do that, that's my autism. And I say, no, that's not true. That it's not your autism. Look, you're the same as me, in that I have strengths and I have weaknesses, and you have strengths and you have weaknesses. And if we come from a strengths and weaknesses model, it's looking at the fact that we all have aspects of life that we have already mastered, and we all have aspects of life that we are yet, and that word's important, that we are yet to master. So the way that I describe autism spectrum disorder is it's really just a description of a person's weaknesses. And there just so happens to be a lot of people in the world that have the same set of weaknesses that would, in short, coincide with socialisation, communication, and what we would call repetitive or adaptive behaviours. And so that's a very short summary of something that could one day become a book. But the reality is that's just a description of the weaknesses. And there's a lot of people in the world that have their same weaknesses. So somewhere in the world there were some so-called decision makers that got together and said, there's all these people that have the same weaknesses, let's give them a label. But I've always said that if there was such a thing as technology disorder, then I'd be the first one with the diagnosis, because I've also got weaknesses, and technology is one of my weaknesses. It just so happens that right now it's not classified as a disorder, but one day it might be. So to me it's never about addressing the label or the diagnosis per se. It's about saying, what are the aspects of life that that person's yet to master, and how do we support a higher level of self-mastery for that individual person.